Good evening and welcome to Undaunted, bringing into the news untold stories. I'm Star Smart. Let's begin. Tonight in Ambazonia, the stories confronting us are not just updates. They are reminders of a struggle that remains far from over. How many more families have to grieve before the world acknowledges the true nature of the violence in the southern Cameroun? How long can illegal forces impose control when an entire people continue to resist erasure? And in a territory where the rightful government remains exiled and occupying power refuses responsibility, who protects the vulnerable trapped between armed actors and a collapsing colonial system? From the European Union's renewed demand for the release of detained Ambazonians after the death of opposition figure Anicet Ekane, to the horrifying killings in Balin, Aqua, where communities question why illegal armed groups roam freely under an occupation force claiming security, and the public outrage spreading across Kumba as civilians face reckless military conduct without accountability. Tonight's headlines push us towards a deeper reflection. When an occupying state consistently fails to protect, responds selectively, or turns a blind eye, can its actions still be seen as failure, or must we start calling it a deliberate strategy of control? But there's other stories shaping Ambazonia. Let's get the prime headlines to see more. Well, these are the prime headlines for Undaunted tonight. We see the EU calling for release of detained southern Cameroun's Ambazonians following the death of opposition leader Anicet Ekane. We also see Issa Tchiroma Bakary making a promise to Anicet Ekane, who was killed in French Cameroun's prison. French Cameroun military truck dismembers civilians in Kumba motorcycle road crash. We see Balin killing, revealing French Cameroun's government sponsorship of illegal armed groups. And on the African scene, Trump to host Kagame and Tshisekedi in Washington for a new U.S. brokered peace deal. And across the rest of the globe, Southeast Asia races to deliver aid as flood disaster leaves over 1,200 dead. And with that, we head into the full briefings of Undaunted tonight. Stay tuned. The European Union has expressed deep sadness over the death of Anicet Ekane, president of the African Movement for New Independence and Democracy, MANIDEM, who died in custody on December 1st, 2025. Ekane was arrested on October 24th, 2025, following post-election protests in French Cameroun. The EU delegation to the Cameroon and Equatorial Guinea has reiterated its call for the release of all individuals arbitrarily detained since the October 12th presidential election, emphasizing the need to ensure the safety and physical integrity of all political actors. The EU has also underscored the importance of justice in addressing instances of excessive use of violence and human rights violation. We see Ekane's death has sparked widespread outrage and calls for an independent investigation into the circumstance surrounding his detention and treatment. The veteran opposition figure had been held on charges of hostility against the state and incitement to revolt, which he denied. His party, Manidem, had expressed concerns about his deteriorating health and alleged that authorities had withheld essential medical equipment. The EU's statement echoes concerns raised by opposition groups and human rights organizations who have demanded accountability for Ekane's death and the release of all detained opposition figures. As the situation unfolds, the international community continues to watch with concern, calling for transparency and justice in the handling of the matter. We have with us in the studio barrister Tim Mbeseha. Oh, I will wait. Okay, good evening, barrister Tim Mbeseha.
Thank you for having me.
It's always a pleasure, and you're welcome. Well, we'll see the report we already have. Now, given the EU's renewed call for the release of all individuals who were arbitrarily detained since the October 12th presidential election, especially in light of Anicet Ekane's death in custody, and what legal obligation does the state of neighboring French Cameroun have under both domestic and international law to ensure the safety, medical access, and due process rights of detainees, and what mechanisms exist to hold authorities accountable when these obligations are violated?
Well, Cameroon being a signatory to most international agreements that govern the detention of people, they are bound by those agreements and treaties, especially because in the Cameroon Constitution, it is stated that foreign agreements, treaties, are above the local laws. So the foreign agreements, the foreign treaties that they have signed up to the United Nations agreements, lay out specific conditions on how to detain people. And those conditions are above the so-called local Cameroon laws, where you can catch you at will. But how far do they abide by these things? As far as Cameroon is concerned, those things mean nothing to them. They don't respect even their own laws, neither do they respect the laws of international organizations. The call from the EU is not new. The EU mission is in Yaoundé. They didn't start in Yaoundé today. They have been there forever. They have been able to see what goes on there. First witness, first impression. And so they know exactly what they are talking about. But the issue that concerns you and me and everybody else is if the government of Cameroun has signed up to these international agreements and they are not respecting them, what are these international organizations doing? What do they have, for example, to hold them accountable? If those agreements or treaties don't have anything to hold a violator responsible, then the treaties themselves are useless because there's no consequence for violating them. But I'm just thinking, I've not read through it, there are ways to handle them responsible. They can be sanctioned. Absent sending a military force to Cameroon, there are other avenues open for them. For example, the very treaties and organizations are linked to International Monetary Fund and other funding organizations. You can hold them accountable for their human rights violations by refusing to give them the loans that they ask for. You can impose a lot of sanctions on Cameroon in particular, and any other countries. They have done that before on other countries. The question is, why has Cameroon gone through all these years without being sanctioned? Yes, Anicet Ekane is dead. It's 2025. But how many Ambazonians have died without question asked? How many people have disappeared without questions asked? Well, Wazizi, they took Wazizi from Boga, a strong, healthy man. They announced to the world that Wazizi is dead. Nobody has ever seen the corpse of Wazizi or the cause of his death. And so this is what Cameroon does when it's allowed to go free. We can only hope and pray that the issue of Ekane should be the final straw that brings the camel back. We expect something to be done. A simple call that should release people detained is not enough. There must be action to be followed if the recommendations are not carried out. And so this Ekane is just one too many. There have been many, especially in Ambazonia. Maybe they didn't consider Ambazonian a place on earth because they have killed people there. They have burnt our houses. They have adopted people who never ever returned to their houses. At least the International Criminal Court is the ICC. We have a file pending there on this side with the names of the suspect. Why are they not indicting them? What are they waiting for? Are there two measures to apply in the same circumstances? Without, I will just pray that the death of Waziri, as I've just said, of Ekane, as I've just said, should be the final straw that breaks. And so those organizations have the power. They just implement. One of the which is available publicly is to charge Paul Biya and his government. Charge those the military commanders who adopted Waziri, who adopted for. And so it's a crime to have done that. And so if the country cannot be punished collectively, the individual of the issue should be dealt with me. Because no, it is the EU. Because their recommendations are important. EU is such a big group. They include the whole of Europe. They're all in the United Nations. Why not do what South Africa did to Israel? Why not collectively bring an action to the ICC, to the International Court of Justice, to hold these people responsible? They have the means, they have the right to know what to do, but they're not doing it. We pray and hope that they do exactly what they're supposed to do, to put an end to this nonsense once and for all. Because, as I've said, no one is above the law, not Paul Biya, not Ngongo, not his generals or the beasts that run under him. Over to you.
All right, Barrister Mbeseha, still talking about the death of Anicet Ekane, we see that the former government minister and President-elect Issa Tchiroma Bakary has paid tribute to the late Anicet Ekane, describing his death in custody as a defining moment in French Cameroon's ongoing political struggle. Ekane, leader of the African Movement for New Independence and Democracy, Manidem, he died in detention on December 1st, 2025, after weeks of arrest-related controversy. Now, following the October 12th presidential election, we see that in his address, Issa Tchiroma Bakary emphasized the national significance of Ekane's death, portraying it as a turning point in the long-standing concerns about political repression, arbitrary detentions, and the treatment of opposition voices in French Cameroon. He highlighted Ekane's passing as more than a personal tragedy, framing it as a reflection of systemic issues in the country's governance and justice system. Tchiroma underscored that Ekane's legacy represents a powerful symbol for citizens advocating for democratic reforms. According to him, the late opposition leader has become an emblem of moral resistance, a figure whose story is now intertwined with broader calls for accountability, justice, and institutional change. Issa Tchiroma stressed that Ekane's death illustrates a wider pattern in which dissent and voices are frequently met with criminalization rather than dialogue. The growing list of political detainees, combined with allegations of mistreatment in custody, has fueled public debate about the state's handling of political opposition. Tchiroma also signaled that Ekane's memory will likely play a continuing role in mobilizing civil society and opposition movements. His passing, he noted, may strengthen demands for a more transparent political process and a justice system capable of protecting rather than endangering those who challenge the status quo. Ekane's death has already triggered widespread reactions across French Cameroon and beyond, with human rights defenders and political observers calling for independent investigations, and the release of all arbitrarily detained individuals. As pressure mounts at both national and international levels, Ekane's legacy, as framed by Issa Tchiroma, is emerging as a potent symbol in a country grappling with deep political fractures and a growing push for democratic accountability. Well, we see that away from Ekane's death in southern Cameroun, a collision involving a colonial military truck and a motorcycle in Kumba has sparked outrage, with residents insisting the crash was not accidental, but part of a routine pattern of intimidation and harm by the occupational forces. Occupational forces from French Cameroon. We see that in the afternoon crash along Boya Road, opposite the Banga School Complex in Kumba. It reignited long-standing anger towards the colonial military. According to witnesses, the truck ran into a motorcycle carrying a female passenger after the rider slowed down to let cows cross. While the rider escaped with minor injuries, the woman suffered a severe leg injury. She had to hold her legs to keep them together. Now, this video circulating online shows her crying out on the roadside as bystanders hesitate, unsure of how to assist, and with no ambulance in sight. What is fueling public fury is not just the crash itself, but what people say it represents. For them, residents told reporters that they do not believe this was a simple road accident. Many insist that the truck's behavior was intentional. The military truck, they described it as another example of how colonial soldiers treat civilians in the southern Cameroon. According to them, Paul Biya's military drivers often move through Amazonian towns at reckless speed, ignoring public safety and behaving as though civilian lives on the road do not matter. Community leaders say it is now a routine pattern, heavy military presence, aggressive conduct by this heavy military, limited accountability, and repeated harm inflicted on ordinary civilians who are already living in an atmosphere dominated by fear and uncertainty. People in Kumba blame the government of neighboring La Republique for enabling this behavior. They argue that years into the war, the so-called authorities have failed to control their own forces or provide basic emergency services. Meanwhile, accident victims continue to suffer or die on the roadside due to the absence of functioning ambulance system, a problem Ambazonians have complained about for decades. Now, given the community's claims that these incidents, Barrister Mbeseha, given the community's claims that these kind of incidents follow a reoccurring pattern of aggressive military behavior, what type of evidence or documentation is needed to establish that this is a systematic issue rather than isolated accidents? Especially looking at that video and seeing the nonchalant reactions of the military who caused this terrible harm on this woman.
Well, I don't know what documentation he wants. There's evidence there. Everybody can see. You can see the one lying down there. Everybody knows that it's a military truck that has caused the accident. Everybody sees the military truck guy walking away. That's the evidence. The question is, are these people lawless people? Are they ever held accountable for anything? The answer is no. Because crushing that woman's feet is not even a big crime. They have been shooting people in the streets for doing nothing. They shoot and kill you, no questions asked. This military, who are supposed to have been paid, who are being paid by taxpayers, including people from Kumba, anywhere else in the world, their role was supposed to be to defend the boundaries of the country, to defend the country against foreign invaders. They are not doing that. They are the people who roam the streets in Kumba and everywhere else in Ambazonia. To do what? To extort money from people publicly, to kill people publicly, to rape women publicly. And I don't remember any one of them who has ever been held accountable. And so it is a lawless military that should not exist anywhere in a civilized world. For example, how many of us remember Moja Moja? Moja Moja commits the crimes publicly. He was taken to detention for some few months. He is back. Also being celebrated by the divisional officer or something like that. He had done all these things on people. He's coming back gloriously, perhaps with a chunk of money given to him by the administration. He is doing all that under the cloak of the military guy. He wears the uniform, carries the guns that are given to him by the government. And so this is a lawless army. Do they have any way to hold him accountable? Sure we do. Are we able to do it? Very difficult. Because the normal way would have been to report them to the authorities and to face sanctions. But what goes on in Cameroon is any crime committed or most crimes committed against civilians in Ambazonia is a thing to reward them. They are even giving promotion for doing what they are doing. And so the case of that woman with the military truck that plows into her is not new. It's not new. But again, is there a way to handle them? I think there is a way. Can we do it by ourselves? I doubt it. Because you are going to report the issue to who? To a DO. You are going to report the thing to an administrator, to a state council, to the chief of police, whatever thing you call it. And they are all accomplices to this. They will not do anything to save you. They will do nothing. Because that thing benefits them. Remember the cases that we already know. For example, I used to be in Moya, and I remember a group of gendarmes. They had the Njange of about £1,000,000 a month that everybody picked. Where did the money come from? From the collections, the extortion they do on the road. The commander of that company in Moya was not required to pay his own part of the money to get the Njange 1 million. All the people who were under him, then he had to pay his. That was his own share of the extortion money they got from the people. Do you expect to hold these people accountable? Of course not. Because who knows? Who knows? They are sent there for that purpose. Because even there, they bribe their bosses to go to the road. Because they know what going to the road stands for. But again, back to this poor woman lying down there. What can she do? I think she can try to do something legally. If she has all the information about the driver, she can at least sue them in a civil court. Better try before you fail. Because going to make a report to their bosses has no meaning. Because they are above the law. Just like we said in the Anicet Ekane's death. What would they not do? As long as they fall under the banner of the CPD, they can do anything they like. I remember on social media, just a few yesterday, we saw a written communique, a report somewhere, where they went to tell the Minister of Territorial Administration they need that Ekane needed to go to hospital because he was dying. What was his response? It's written there that he will be happy if he dies. And that if he died, he, Atanganji, will be happy to buy a coffin for him. This is the minister say about Ekane publicly. And again, I said it yesterday and I'll repeat it today. This is Ekane who is dead. Everybody agrees it was wrong. And then you see the Minister of Communication. He puts out something there in the name of the government. What is he saying? He said that, well, the important is that, well, if there was consultations, if he was consulted, he would not have agreed that they should arrest Ekane. Well, you're not talking there for yourself. He's talking for the government. And then you find a communique from the Minister of Defense, faking out excuses, trying to justify this man's death. And so where do we go? You cannot have justice from the government. Can you have justice by yourself? No. And so that is one of the reasons that we fight. We already lost too many people to let go. We can fight and we should fight until we end this occupation, build from the pieces that we can pick. We have suffered so much. We have suffered more than normal. And so we have to fight and fight until even our children who survive must benefit from this fight and end this rebellion. and end this occupation, and end this legal treatment of citizens, and end this public torture of our citizenry. And so, again, that is a government in out of control. So, Ambazonians who have to fight, who are fighting, make a little bit contribution. Hopefully, this thing will end and we'll handle what is left going forward. Over to you.
Yeah, it is quite sad that one of the things you said is the fact that in as much as this woman was badly hurt, almost amputated on the spot, that is even little compared to what these colonial forces in Amazonia do as they go around killing people and shooting them in broad daylight. It is sad because the Undaunted here would have to concord to that, seeing several scenarios and these new revelations which have exposed more of the monstrous killings of 4 civilians, including 2 primary school pupils from the same family who were eliminated early on Monday in Ubakan Quarter, Balin Aqua of the Midland Zone, Manu. The attack, attributed by residents to Esimbi fighters, has renewed public scrutiny of why such illegal armed group continue to move and strike with little resistance from colonial security forces, as opposed to French Cameroon's resistance against the Ambazonian State Army. We see at approximately 6:30 a.m. on December 1st, 2025, armed men identified by residents as Esimbi fighters attacked the compound of the late Pa Ania, killing 4 people, including 2 children. Terrified villagers fled the area. The first video footage of the attack was shared by Yongo Joseph, a graduate student at the Research Institute of Informatics, who confirmed the footage's authenticity through contacts on the ground. The footage shows residents reacting in shock, while some attempt to help the wounded. Local sources point out that attacks in Mbeseha, Aqua, and Balin communities have occurred repeatedly over the years, with minimal response from the so-called present security forces. As such, they believe, and reasonably so, that the attackers' ability to operate freely is a clear indication of the involvement of the colonial regime's sponsorship of such group, given their ineffectiveness in protecting the area. Following the killings, a protest erupted at the Balin Colonial Gendarmerie Brigade, with community members demanding immediate protection, a thorough investigation into the incident, and action to prevent future attacks. La Republique's officials have yet to release a public statement detailing the measures that will be taken, if they would even release any at all. And this is really sad, the loss of 4 persons in a family, Amazonian lives lost on a daily basis in different circumstances. We wonder, when illegal armed groups operate freely, while heavily militarized state forces remain inactive and silent, what conclusions can be reasonably drawn about state interest or informal alliances in such conflict zones? Barrister Mbeseha.
Well, if you're expecting solutions for any problem in Balin, that is in Aqua, you're making a mistake. Aqua did not exist today. Aqua was one of the first subdivisions in the whole country. So by 1961, there was Aqua there. As of today, as we speak, 60 plus years. What is an Aqua to represent the government of Yaoundé? The only thing they have there, if there's anything, are the gendarme posts. There's no road. The people have to use the Naira. If they have to come to Kumba, to Buea, to anywhere in southern Cameroun, they have to go through Nigeria, use visas to cross and come back there because there's no road. So what has the government of Cameroun to show in Aqua more than the military occupation? The best they can think about now as Aqua people is that thousands of Indians are in exile in Nigeria, escaping from what? From the colonial occupation military forces. And so Aqua is an unfortunate place. But the question is, this fight between the Simbi and the Balin people. Where is the government? It is like the farmer grazier issue of the Mboruros. If they have been having this conflict over the years, what has the administration of Cameroun in Yaoundé done? Absolutely zero. They leave them to be there at their own risk. If it is death, they die. If it is an epidemic, it takes them away. If it is war, they escape. So these are some of the people who have suffered the so-called union with Cameroon since 1961. Why, one must ask, how much does it cost to construct a road? Aqua is part of Manyo. How much does it cost to construct a road across? When they deemed it necessary, they built a bridge over the Cross River to a few kilometers inside Aqua. They call it Manfi oversight. Not to help the people, but to exploit the timber from there. They exploited the timber. I think they're still exploiting now. If there's a breakdown, it is because of the war. But he asked, what has Aqua got in all this? Nothing. But over the years, Aqua has had representation in Yaoundé in the name of the CPDM, in the name of the CNU, and other political parties. They are still there. Most of them live in Yaoundé. And then they are there representing who? I don't know. And so the killings in Balin, I would say, I would hold the government responsible. Because there are issues that have been there forever. Government could have resolved those disputes long time ago if they knew what they were doing. But there, you have somebody in Aqua calling himself the divisional officer. In other words, a chef d'etat who enjoys the presidential decree that carves out his own territory and gives him. But he goes there as a stranger. He joins the extortion. He joins the deliberate negligence of the people. He does nothing when war comes and spare everybody away to escape to Nigeria. What have these people done? What have these people done to have this curse fall down on them? They did nothing. The only thing that they've done, which is natural, is that they are Ambazonians. Ambazonians, as far as Yaoundé is concerned, are only good for the milking. You make money out of them. You don't do any development there. Punish them if you so wish. Let them die if they so wish. That's not the problem with Yaoundé. As long as they have a representation in Yaoundé and they know of the wonderful thing called CPDM, Yaoundé is fine. Yaoundé is okay. And so the Balin war fight and the illegal killing, government is 100% responsible. Because if you end up as a deal, it is your responsibility to prevent those intertribal fights. If you are not doing it, you fail. That's why you are called chef d'etat. If the chef d'etat cannot do it, he's failed. But you're not doing it. He's supposed to give the proposal to the presidency because he has a presidential decree. If this master at the palace in Yaoundé does not listen to his reports, well, that is not the fault of the Aqua man. It is the fault of Yaoundé, where they have a government that is so incoherent and has no meaning to anybody. Over to you.
Mr. Mbeseha. That explains it from another angle, what is really happening in these zones at the detriment of southern Cameroon. But it is at this juncture we'll appreciate you for coming yet again on Undaunted for tonight. But for now, we'll head on to the rest of the news on the foreign scene. On the African scene, fresh clashes between the M23 rebel movement and forces loyal to the Congolese government, supported by coalition troops, have intensified instability in South Kivu province. Fighting broke out on Tuesday, December 2nd, 2025, across several localities, including Katogota, Luvungi, Kaziba Haut, Plateau, Chivanga Hombo, and Kasika Mwenga. Reports from the area describe heavy exchanges of gunfire, prompting thousands of residents to flee their homes in search of safety. The renewed confrontations add pressure to an eastern region already strained by years of conflict involving multiple armed groups. The M23 leader Bertrand Bisimwa acknowledged that hostilities had resumed, while the group's spokesperson Lawrence Kanyuka accused government and coalition forces of targeting densely populated areas. He warned that conditions on the ground were deteriorating rapidly, with devastating consequences for civilians trapped between advancing troops and rebel positions. Humanitarian organizations say continued fighting in South Kivu risks deepening an already fragile situation, complicating aid access and heightening fears of a broader regional escalation. Still on the African scene, the United States President Donald Trump is set to welcome Rwandan President Paul Kagame and Congolese President Felix Tshisekedi to Washington on Thursday for the signing of what the White House calls a historic peace and economic agreement. The announcement was made by White House spokesperson Caroline Leavitt, who confirmed that Washington will serve as the host for the high-stakes diplomatic event. Let's take a listen. Well, that announcement was made by Caroline Leavitt. We hope to get it across soon, but then President Tshisekedi had already confirmed last week that he would not attend the ceremony. The agreement is expected to build on a series of earlier accords, including a June peace deal signed by both countries, foreign ministers, and an economic cooperation framework reached in November. This upcoming deal marks the culmination of months of U.S.-mediated efforts aimed at stabilizing eastern Congo, where the presence of the M23 rebel group has fueled ongoing tensions between Kinshasa and Kigali. The Congolese government has repeatedly stated that any long-term peace arrangement must include Rwanda's withdrawal of alleged support for the rebel movement, an accusation Kigali denies. President Kagame, for his part, has accused Congolese authorities of delaying the final signature of the agreement. And while expressing cautious optimism, he emphasized that durable peace in Eastern Congo requires genuine commitment from all parties directly implicated in the crisis. Parallel to the United States-led initiative, the Democratic Republic of Congo is also pursuing negotiations with M23 in Qatar. On November 15, Kinshasa and the rebel group signed a peace framework in Doha, building on a prior declaration of principles and signaling the possibility of dual-track diplomacy to end the conflict. And with that, we head on to the rest of the news on the global scene. On the global scene, the United States is moving ahead with its push to end the war in Ukraine, with the United States envoy Steve Witkoff expected in Moscow for high-level discussions with Russian President Vladimir Putin. The meeting comes at a moment when Washington appears increasingly confident about its proposed peace framework, following recent negotiations with Ukrainian representatives in Florida. Despite this momentum, the proposal is drawing concern across Europe. President Volodymyr Zelensky is actively seeking support from European partners who fear the United States plan, drafted without Kyiv's or Europe's participation, may tilt in Moscow's favor and sideline Ukraine's core security demands. Ukraine's chief negotiator, Rustem Umerov, acknowledged that the Florida talks produced significant progress, though he stressed that some of the most sensitive and difficult issues still require further negotiation. The upcoming Moscow meeting is expected to test whether Washington's approach can gain traction with the Kremlin or further widen the divide between Ukraine and its traditional allies. In Asia, governments and humanitarian organizations across Southeast Asia specifically are scrambling to deliver emergency assistance after the catastrophic flooding left more than 1,200 people dead across 4 countries. The crisis has severely affected communities in Indonesia, Sri Lanka, southern Thailand, and northern Malaysia. Last week's torrential monsoon rains, intensified by 2 separate tropical cyclones, triggered widespread destruction, sweeping away homes, cutting off major roads, and overwhelming local infrastructure. While floodwaters have begun to recede, the humanitarian fallout remains immense. Hundreds of thousands of survivors are now sheltering in temporary camps where access to clean water, food, and medical care is becoming increasingly strained. Aid groups in Indonesia say the situation is especially critical in Aceh province, where markets are running out of essential goods and prices of basic items have already tripled. Relief agencies warn that without rapid coordination and sustained support, affected populations could face a secondary crisis driven by disease outbreaks, malnutrition, and prolonged displacement. With that, we've come to the end of Undaunted tonight, but before we go, let's take a look at our major highlights. On Undaunted tonight, we saw the EU calls for release of detained Ambazonians following death of opposition leader Anicet Ekane. Issa Tchiroma also making a promise to Anicet Ekane, who was killed in French Cameroun's prison. The French Cameroon military trucks dismembers a civilian in Kumba in the southern Cameroon in a motorcycle road crash. And Balin killings reveal French Cameroon's government sponsorship of illegal armed groups. On the African scene, we saw Trump set to host Kagame and Tshisekedi in Washington for new U.S. brokered peace deal. And on the global scene, Southeast Asia races to deliver aid as flood disaster leaves over 1,200 persons dead. And that was it for tonight's Undaunted, bringing into the news untold stories. On behalf of the entire Undaunted newsroom, we say thank you for joining in, and we leave you with ABC Amba TV images. Good night and God bless you.